Okay, good morning. Can you all hear me? Can somebody give me a sound check?
I can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. Good morning, Heather, love. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. It is Sunday, February 9th, 2020, episode 352. These are morning misfit calls. We do them 7 days a week. Weekdays we do them at 6:30 a.m. and on the weekends we do them a little bit later, 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. And on these calls, well, I got to tell you, some amazing things happen on these calls. Today I'm going to have a little bit of a conversation. Probably tomorrow I'll launch a 4-week course on building your story, building your business. And when I added it all up, it's about a little over 13 grand worth of training that I'm just going to do something ridiculous tomorrow for y'all. If I decide to do it, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it. So I think it's going to be amazing. So anyways, I'm going to give you kind of a little teaser on it here real quick. But before we get started, a couple of things. One, send out your messages of joy, of gratitude, of thanks. Your 3 messages, that would be very cool. Send those out to your community, to those people that you love. And I'm getting that, I'm getting this feeling to ask, has anybody had an aha or an awareness that they want to share? Has anybody had this big aha or something? I'm getting a feeling. Could be wrong. Could be, goodness gracious knows I've been wrong many times. So if anybody's had an aha or an awareness they want to share before we got started, maybe that'll come in on another phone call or something, but I'm not sure. Okay. So with that being said, let me go over here. Where did you go? Oh, you're over here. Okay. So let me put this, close that. Put this over here. It's going to take up all the screens here real quick. Because it's in the keynote. Y'all let me know that you can. Okay, so now you're seeing both screens over here. There we go. Green, you're still over there. Why is it showing there?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Latoya. Technology, right? No, it's just going to be like that. So, building your story, getting to understand how and why it's important for you to really get clear on your story. This is just a couple of the slides that I pulled from the training. Getting clear on who your avatar is. Right? Do you know exactly who your avatar is? There's a lot of people who show up who might be outside of your avatar because they're a psychographic. And they're a particular demographic. Somebody shared your information. They think you're pretty cool for a day. But understanding who it is that becomes the lifeblood of your community, right? So understanding that is a conversation. Understanding your audience. Larry Thompson, it's called the Thompson Rule, the 80, 15, and 5. And understanding how that actually works. And at each of these levels, you're going to have, in the 80% group, you're going to have 5%ers in the 80% group. And what this is that 80% of your audience, they just want to be there. They just want to show up. They want to just hang out with you. So maybe you're on different social media platforms, right? I've got a lot more people I've got a bigger group in Facebook, but they're not as active as my Instagram community, which is why I'm spending a lot more time in my Instagram community. It's a different group. My Instagram community is the 15%. So I'm going to go spend time there. I'll swim in all of them, but it's important to understand where your community comes from and how they act. And you can't change them. You're not going to change them. But understanding inside of your social media, do you know where your 80, 15, and 5 is? And if you don't have other areas, other venues to be sharing your information, I would encourage you, that would be something that I would encourage you to get started on. Just because there's other people that are out there that they're going to be the one-offs that can provide significant results for you as you build your business. Avatar questions. Do you ask these avatar questions? Have you asked these avatar questions? What is their conversation? What is their ability? Right? So this is almost 1.5 weeks of conversation. But inside this training that I'm going to be doing, there's going to be a whole Facebook group where you can, where that's just going to be for the people that are inside of the training. So all of these questions can get answered. It's more than just the 4 hours of training. There's probably 18 hours of conversations back and forth. The 13 critical questions. Do you know the 13 critical questions that create or move an audience? Okay. So here's 7 of them, just to give you an idea. Who's your audience? What's the solution they're looking for? What's the reminder they need to hear? What's the forward-facing message? What's your behind-the-scenes message? This is so that you can do 2-minute videos that create impact. When you start to boil it down to the obvious, right? Was it Sherlock Holmes said, when you eliminate all of the things that don't make sense, what's left is the obvious, no matter how crazy it sounds. That's what happens when you start to get these 13 questions answered, and these were 7 of them. So making sure that you start to work towards these ideas, towards these ideals, as you have conversations with your audience, is a big thing. Now, there's a whole lot more to that. I get that. And those individual slides could be pretty important. My point is, there's a lot to your story. More people know their comp plan better than they know their story. And that's why a lot of people fail in this business. Right? It would be just like you going to own a store and knowing all about the threads and all about the ingredients in the products on your shelves, but never being able to give people a reason to buy your product. When you understand your story at the level that the people who are leading do, your doors go wide open, and you put an open for business sign. You do an I'm like you sign on your chest. And all of a sudden people come by because they want to have, the only reason people buy stuff, think about you. Think about the last thing you bought. It's probably so you could have a story, right? Be it a Starbucks coffee, or be it a Tesla, or be it some makeup or some jewelry or some shoes. Right? I don't buy shoes that often, but when I see a crazy pair of shoes that are my size and they're kind of comfortable, I'm getting them because I want to be able to brag on the things that I have. So I share this with you because it's important for you as you start moving forward. We're in the busiest season right now for network marketing for a lot of people. If you learn how to build your story and learn how to build your community, there's usually not a slow season. Right? There's slower seasons, but it just doesn't die like some people's business do in the summer, right? Or when the kids are going back to school, or on holiday, right? The Europeans, typically the whole month of August is holiday. I've had some of my biggest months in the European market in the month of August, when they all head off to Tanzania or someplace and they all come back, 17 shades of red. You can always tell holiday season in Europe at the airport, who's going and who's coming. They usually go on 7-day trips. Anyways, so I say that to say this. What questions do you have about your story? What ideas would you be looking for? How is your story going? If I were to ask you to tell your story, let's see, I think Heather, I know, has got her story down. Monique's got her story down. Some of you are still working on it, practicing it, and that's a good thing. It's not that they became so good at it overnight. I've been telling my story for 30 years, and there's little tweaks and adds to it, and some dings and dents that get buffed out of it over time. So let's have a conversation this morning, but have a conversation about anything, right? You know how that's how these calls go. There's not a specific topic. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. But what's your feedback? What's your thoughts? And if you would like to share, raise your hand. I'll give you a shout. It's a scary topic, your story. It's
Hi.
good morning.
Hey. Good morning. So, we've been talking about stories a lot, and um, I've been thinking about, like, I know that we talked before about, like, like my past employment history and stuff like that, but I kind of think that, well, I don't think, I know that my story is much more than that. And, um, like I'm the type of person, like I don't mind telling people the surface level of what I've done. Like it's always like, hey, my name is Brittany. I'm originally from Chicago. Then I moved to LA. Then I moved to Atlanta. Then I moved to Chicago. Then I moved to LA. Then I moved back to Atlanta. And I've been here, and I've done this, this, and this. And it's just all so surface level. And like obviously, like once I say that, I've moved around so many times. People want to know like, okay, how'd you do it? Like not only financially, but they want to know how I did it, I guess, psychologically, and it's like, I want to share that with people without like, because I think like a lot of times when I share with people, for lack of a better word, I want to say, no, that word doesn't fit, but I don't know, like the word condescending comes to mind because
Mhm.
that's not necessarily like the word that I want to use, but it comes off of a because I don't necessarily have like fear when it comes to that. So it's like, how do I translate that, or like how do I encourage people to take those leaps of faith as I have taken, or large leaps, without like being
Well, they won't.
pushy.
They'll take a leap that's big for them, that seems simple for you. So the challenge is that where the condescending might come in is the feeling that they can't, they feel that they might not be able to connect with you to be able to use your experience.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to tell your story, and there's a lot more to your story, I get that. But right
Mm-hmm.
now, if the story is about moving,
Mm-hmm.
if we could make it real simple for them to understand that they're all moving the exact same amount in their own lives,
Mm-hmm.
it could be something similar to say, one of the things that people kind of, they're taken aback a little bit when I tell them my story is that I went from LA to Chicago to LA to Chicago and back and forth, and I had all of these reasons to move. The majority of them were at my own decision. Now, it doesn't really it is expensive to move, but here's the question I've had friends ask me as it relates to personal development. What does it cost us not to move? When we get stuck in our story, when we become stale in our growth, the reason many of you here, if this is a biz opportunity meeting or a biz opportunity conversation, the reason many people show up at our business opportunity meetings is because they want to move. They want to move to a new location. They want to move to a new destination of success. Many people say, well, weren't you scared moving to LA by yourself? And I'd be like, not really. I was unknown. Many of you are sitting in the same seat. You may not be moving to LA, but you're moving into the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to share with you is that when you show up here in the unknown, in what we're doing here as a community, you're going to have a lot of good neighbors. Wouldn't it make sense? Wouldn't you be excited to move to a place to where you knew the neighbors were going to help you and take care of you? Wouldn't it be,
Absolutely. Yeah.
wouldn't it be a neat place to know that if you wanted to ask about the local grocery store or the comp plan, how to generate income, how to create a safe move, wouldn't it make sense to ask the people who have already done it? And that's why we're here today. That's why we're having this one-on-one. That's why we're in this biz up meeting. Whatever it is, wherever you're at, you get to now say all of the fears that you experienced can be translated into all of the fears the person, the new prospect is experiencing right now as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm going to like cultivate it and think it over some more so that I can kind of just pinpoint. And I think I'm gonna start talking more too.
Well, the other thing, the other challenge is that there's a bigger story that is one that mm, most people may not know how to transition that you've got, and that doesn't need to come out here. But there's a bigger story there. There's
Yeah.
there's a story that's behind that shield that is could be wildly emotional, but it's just one of those ones that you were told it's better if nobody else knows about this. So that one we can work on privately. If you ever wanted to do that, I'd be happy to help you because that's a big part of this distance, this gap that gets created. It comes out in the essence. Even if you just know the story and you've told the story to yourself, and you can come up with a good way to tell yourself that story. I go to Heather Love, and look at the story that she tells. She had to come up with a way to tell that story for 13 years before she ever made it public. Waking up in a Colombian prison and spending the next 3 years there, waking up there on her 25th birthday with her 5-year-old son at home. 13 years that story was there.
And I didn't start telling it by just telling it. I started sharing I started sharing what was comfortable for me. I started sharing my weight loss journey with the world. Like that's what I did. I started showing people because I felt like that was safe, and I felt like so many more people could relate to that, right? I was a new mom, I had kids, and I was depressed, and I had this weight, and it was just something that you always hear people talking about. Everybody wants to lose weight, men, women, whatever you're going through. And that's what happened. Like, so it took 5 years of doing that, 5 years of of little weight loss along the way. And I was making progress in the weight loss, but yet it was never good enough for me. It ended up being 106 pounds before I really realized like that was no easy task. And then I started feeling bad because I felt like I wasn't being really real with people about who I really was, right? Like I'm sharing this weight loss journey with these people and what I'm doing to get there, but behind that was something even bigger, something scary that I was afraid to talk about, something that I thought people would run from me because of. I didn't want other moms to know that story because I was afraid that they wouldn't they wouldn't they wouldn't let their kids interact with my kids. They wouldn't look at me the same. Like that was real. That was frightening. Now, it was easy for me to share it with my husband when I knew that I wanted to get married. Like that was easy because I knew that it was important and it was something I had to tell those, those people who came into my life. But everyone else was blocked from that. And I never realized how important that part of me was. I mean, and even the stuff before that, right? It was so much that led up to me ending up in that place. But I was so scared to let people find out some of my darkest nightmares. And honest to God, those things that I was so scared of people hearing and knowing are the things that are attracting more people to me.
Yeah.
And Brittany, you may not have a story that is honestly may not be bad at all, but there's an essence that's not showing up.
I'm trying to figure out like how I actually feel about it because it's like I'm not afraid to tell it. I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. Like it's just maybe I'm just too lackadaisical about it. Like I find it unimportant, but like it could be important. Like other people could relate, but I don't find it to be that significant. Like if I tell it like out loud, people will be like, "Oh my God, like that's important." But I'm like, but I've lived it, so it's just like, you know, like does that make sense?
And again, your vulnerability gives us strength. You've lived through it, so it's really not that big of a deal. You've already gotten through it. Um, and this is a level of high intelligence. And I'm not saying that to be cheeky, but there's a
Hmm.
part of you that says that's done. That's a part of my life that's over with, already done. Box that up, put it on the shelf, and it's okay. It don't. It really doesn't really affect me. And honestly, it doesn't.
That's how I feel.
But
That
here's the
is how I
part though.
feel.
It's not letting people connect because there's a part of you that's on the shelf that we all, there's empaths and a variety of people who they can't figure out, they're getting a vanilla ice cream without the whipped cream or the hot fudge and not cherry on top, and you're
Right.
like, but I don't like any of that stuff. I get it, but we do.
Right. No, yeah.
So that's where the difference is. And every time Heather tells her story, as Monique says, she keeps getting more and more confident the more that she tells it. Listen, I promise you this: when Heather Love tells her story and people's jaws hit the floor and they're a gasp and a gape and they're in just absolute shock and horror and scared and oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to this human being. And that happens at 1 o'clock at a meeting. You know what the sad part is by 3 o'clock? They really don't care.
Yeah.
But
Some
between one
people.
and two, they fell in love with Heather. And they now have a reason at point B to always fall in love with Heather because she has that story. All I'm saying is that as you become more comfortable, the what's your end goal? What is your ultimate goal, Brittany, when you have a conversation with somebody? What's the ultimate goal that's your desire? That right now, as we sit here today, and it could change this afternoon, but as we sit here right now, what would be your ultimate desire for somebody who interacts with you? How would you want them to leave your presence? What would you want them to feel?
That they can do it, that they can do anything that they want to do because life has no rules.
So the reason that they don't feel that way is because they don't know the whole code. And the code that they're trying to break is comp plans there, that this is there. But how many times, listen, in 120 seconds, they have done studies where they can predict college students. They took these college students, they showed a 10-minute clip of professors. And in 10 minutes, they came up without sound, just watching their mannerisms. And in 10 seconds, I'm sorry, in 10 minutes, they came up with a personality profile. And I said, I wonder if we take another set of college students and show them just the same professor, but we only show them 5 minutes of that clip. I wonder what if their perception will be different. Perception was the same with 5 minutes. They said, we're going to go crazy now. We're just going to get nuts now. And they showed them 2 minutes of the clip to another group. And they came up with the same interpretation. So they went from 10 to 5 to 2. You want to know when it got scary? You know when it got crazy? When they showed 2 seconds of the same clip. They came up with the exact same perception. This means that part of you that's being hidden comes out in the first 2 seconds of somebody meeting. And it doesn't matter how good, how elegant, how sophisticated the rest of your conversation is. Somebody knows that there's something underneath the covers.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter how beautiful you look or how tall you are or how short you are or how short your skirt is or how long your dress is or how high your heels are. That's all great. But in 2 seconds, they're getting a feeling about you that you know something's on the shelf. They know something's on the shelf. And guess what they're going to want to know the whole rest of the time they get to spend with you?
What's on the shelf?
Who's on the shelf? Oh, no, I get that. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's intelligent. She's traveled more miles than her luggage has gone on more trips than I have. But what's on the shelf? What's on the
You
shelf?
know, that's actually true because I've, like, people have just flat out told me stuff like that. Not verbatim, but they're like, yo, like, you're so, like, there's like a mystery to you, you know? Like, they say that all the time. I'm just like,
And now here's where you get to leverage that. I call it the red velvet rope of marketing. It doesn't have to be you don't have to go buy a billboard, but everybody that comes into your presence,
mhm.
they get to cross over to the red velvet rope. Now they may leave the club. They may leave the club, but at least they got in there and they got to look around a little bit, go, oh, so this
But
is
like,
the rest of the story.
do they do like, I think, I don't want to dominate this call, but like, do they deserve that? Like, do people deserve? I think that's
So
another thing that kind of like hinders me because I'm like,
if you
I don't
want
owe
people,
you that.
if you want people to feel that they can get the things done, if you want people to feel that they can do it on their own, that they have the capability, the capacity, and the desire and the drive, that they should be able to get it done on their own. That's what you want them to feel when they leave, right?
There should be a way for me to tell a lot, or there should be a way for me to tell my story without exposing everything, which makes them feel like they know a lot.
Listen, when Heather tells her story about her childhood, when she about how it was abusive and absolutely and taken advantage of and all of this stuff, and then she tells her story about prison and all of this. What it does is it's not that it allows us to hear her story; it allows her to stand in her story. Two different things. When
Mm,
I talk about my mom growing up as a child of an alcoholic mother, when I talk about that idea of codependency, a name that somebody in science gave, this thing about many of us grew up with alcoholic parents.
I get that.
It's for no other reason than for me to stand strong in my story. When my brother was thrown out of the house and wanted everything about him erased from the face of the planet when he was outed when I was 14 and he was 18 at the time, and he was outed being gay, and that whole thing just absolutely tore our family apart. Nobody cares. Nobody
Yeah, but
cares.
the examples that you gave, like, they aren't, yes, they may have affected you, but like, just from the examples that you gave, they aren't really you. Like you said, your mother was a child of an alcoholic. That's her.
No,
Your
but
brother,
I was that child. So I was the child of my mother. So yes, but that is her. But the point is that there's so many people who can't even admit to that. That when we stand up as leaders and we lead people, if we give people a chance to follow our story, they may not do anything with it. But if I can tell my story and it helps anyone on this call take care of their family better, I have a responsibility as a leader to do that. And if I don't, I'm going to be constantly selling myself and them short. And therefore, my audience evaporates over time. It's just that's human nature. I get what you're saying. Here's the good news. I feel like I'm talking to my oldest brother, who's a genius, who's going for he's 65 years old. How old is he, Michael? He's he's 60 years old, 61 years old. So maybe they were I was 13. But he's going to be 61 and he's going for his dissertation on February 27th. So he's
oh,
going for his master's or something. I have no idea. He's been in school since he's 14. He's brilliant. I know that's exactly who I'm talking to, this brilliant soul. That's like, no. I got this package and they get this. They don't need any more than that. We need more than that. It's You may never want to tell us any more than that, but it's going to help us. So Monique, you wanted to share something from a woman, from a person who's been through this story perspective.
Yes, for sure. You know, there's a difference between telling your story and telling the story you tell yourself. So, as an example, Brittany, I could tell the story of like Heather. I was 400 pounds and I decided I needed to get healthier. And I went on this journey to lose weight. Okay. I could tell that story. And yes, that might resonate with somebody in the room who also wants to lose weight. Or I could say, I went to a doctor's office and the doctor stood in front of me and said, in 5 years, you are going to be either dead with diabetes or have had a stroke or a heart attack. I could tell the story about how I went to a restaurant and couldn't fit in the chair and the embarrassment that caused me. I can tell the story about how I couldn't go to theme parks or baseball games or sporting events because I couldn't fit in those chairs. I could tell the story about how I ripped clothes trying them on in the dressing room. So that is the reality of my story. And as I'm even saying those things, 7 years later, I want to cry because of the way it impacted me at the moment that I was feeling it.
Hmm.
And when you start to have the reliving that moment again in your own head, and people start to see, wow, 7 years later, she still feels like this, it still impacts her that way. That is where you connect with people because you're showing the real side. People can really see when you are being phony with them, and they can see when you're being genuine. And I get it, you're protecting yourself because if you really say your true story, you have to relive it again. And it's hard. But the more you relive it and the more somebody else connects with it, the more you go, man, I'm just like everybody else. Everybody else is having these same, feelings and insecurities and struggles. And then you tell it. And even every time I tell my story, I think Heather does the same thing. Every time Sean hears Heather's story, he hears another piece of it because it's so true that the more you tell your story, the more even you uncover about the experience, which is amazing. But you can't get there until you tell it and you allow people to engage with you on that level. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, that actually makes absolute sense. What I took from that is that I could tell the story in a way that people can apply my feelings to whatever it is in their own life versus just giving extreme specifics.
Well, and here's the thing: once you start to tell it, just like that's the first time I heard Monique's part of a story about clothes ripping. Here's what's neat when I get to hear other people's story, Brittany, is that I I'm in a health and wellness company, and I can talk to people now when I do a live. I can say something to the effect of, I was on a call this morning and I heard some people who were talking about their struggle in life and struggle through weight. I never even imagined this before. Is there anybody that's listening or watching this live that's ever gone into a dressing room and they were afraid to come out of the dressing room, not because the clothes fit, but because the clothes rip? See, that's not my story. That's not my story, but that allowed me to connect in a way I could never, ever, 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 never imagine how to connect. And what your story does is it gives people a way to connect with people through you to other people. So that's, again, as you get more comfortable with your story and telling it and pulling that little mystery off the shelf, what you might see as you do that is a whole wildly new level of connection with people, and that may even excite you more. And you'll go, well, if that's part of what made it is me sharing my story, maybe logically, if a little is good, maybe a little more is better.
Mhm.
So you may just walk through that process. Excellent.
Thanks.
You bet. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that. You don't think it's not really that big of an important thing to share your story, because there's other people on this call right now going, well, I mean, how many of you, listen carefully, how many of you, when you heard Brittany tell her story, that she's like, well, that's on the shelf, that's written, I don't think it's not that important for them to hear that story. I'm giving them all of the facts and all the information over here. How many of you felt that way? How many of you felt that way? So, Brittany, look, you telling this story right now, look at the people that it's helping. And guess what? I bet if you guys had a conversation, you could all say, well, but why don't they just get the rest of our business? Why do they need to know my story? Here's the difference. They don't need to, they get to. This is what built your vibe, creates your tribe. So, awesome. Good morning, Gisela. Did I see you sitting outside in the sun?
Yeah, I'm sitting outside in the sun next to the pool listening to this call. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you great.
Okay. Well, this topic of the story is something I'm still like unfolding mine. And I think, from what I hear from Brittany, she's a little bit like myself. She is a person that wants to look, well presented, well thought her ideas. And she is an amazing, woman that, empowers others like, oh, I want to be like Brittany. And a lot of times we uncover our own truths. And as we start telling the story, it's not so much about giving them all the facts of our life to people, but find that connection between them and us. Like I was hearing your story about um, your mom being raised in a household where your somebody was alcoholic. That relates to Fanny and myself because my dad was an alcoholic. We didn't know at the time when we were children. Now as an adults we know, and it makes a lot of sense on some things that happened in our household when we were growing up. Your brother being gay, our brother is gay, our situation how he came out was very different, but it creates that bonds that we have something in common with the person we're talking. And we don't have to be very specific, but just let them see some realness from us that, hey, we have similar struggles. We've been maybe having some same issues, growing up. Like, for instance, when I was growing up, my parents were, um, working really hard. I didn't have anybody to take care of me. So they sent me to my parents' farm, and I was raised there for my first 5 years of age. Well, I thought that wasn't like very significant, but I realized that it's part of who I am because, many parents have to leave their children with, strangers, and they missed out so much. And the story is just about finding those human connections. And I think as the more we practice and practice, you know, we will start telling some of those truths that sometimes are hard for us to admit will come out in a way that is compassionate and caring and will create that, bond with other people. So Brittany, practice your story, practice. And, when you feel that like inside it's time to say it, we all would love to be here to support you, help you, because it is sometimes, a comfort zone thing. Like we want to be in a place that is, we feel safe. And this is the perfect misfit community to do that. We all love you. We will share for you. And we are excited to hear very soon your story, Brittany.
Thank you. I will actually share it soon. I don't mind, but I'll save that for like next weekend or something.
And Amani, you asked a question earlier, and I want to let you know that I saw it. What if you're still going through the story? Absolutely, you get to tell it. You even get to tell it. Listen, I'm not sure how it's going to end. I know how I want it to end, but here's the story I'm going through right now. And you can tell that. All of us are still going through our story, right? Heather is, even though she started to tell her story, and Monique is telling her story, right? It's a 7-year story. It's ongoing. It's a daily struggle. One of the things I heard from people who are wildly overweight, and the challenge when, I bet Monique was at 400 pounds at one time in her life. But the challenge is that how many times until there was this commitment, how many times has she lost the same pound a dozen times, right? So the story's constantly ongoing, and there's still that story today of there's this thing called the fat brain. I don't know if that's a technical term, but sometimes you can look in the mirror. It's the cybernetics book that Maxwell Maltz wrote called Cybernetics, where people couldn't see the beauty after the facial surgery. They still saw the old scars. So even as we tell these stories, even as Heather tells her stories, Monique tells her stories, every one of you tell your story, there's still this scar that in the book Manuscript Found in Accra by Paulo Coelho, he's where the main character says, the sword that created the scars isn't as strong as the scar. Right? The scars you carry are stronger than the sword that made them. It shows you were in battle. So part of the reason for telling your story is for people to hear the conversation saying, oh my God, they've been through a battle. Yeah, but it's really nothing now. We won it. We're all winning. Let's move on to the next battle. Sometimes they want to know that you're battle worthy. Right? That's all the story does. Nobody wants your story. I don't want Heather's story. I don't want Monique's story. I don't want Rhonda's story. I don't want Fanny's story or Gisella's story or anybody else's story that's on here. The scars you carry are stronger than the sword that made them. It shows you were in battle and you won. Because otherwise that what the sword would have done would have killed you. But if it healed up and it's a scar, that scar you carry is stronger than the sword that made it. So, Brianna, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So I really like this call because and as Brittany was saying her story, and I've listened to Monique's story and Heather's story, and I kind of sat back today and was like, okay, well, what is it about my story that I kind of struggle with? And one thing that I realized is that I don't have a problem telling my story, but there's one just specific part that I don't like to talk about because it's a quote unquote taboo topic in society. And that part of the story is when after I graduated college in 2017, in June, a month after, internally, mentally, I was kind of going through like, what do I do now? Because I played basketball since I was 9 years old, and that was my goal, was to play basketball, go to college, be the first in my family to graduate. Well, once I checked that off my list, I had nothing else that I I thought I didn't have anything that I could go after and chase. And so I started to go through doubt, and that negative entity started to like take over and kind of control me. And I remember, when was it? I think it was in mid 2018. So all of for a year, basically, I was going through, and it was mainly just mental. It didn't start showing in the physical world, but I allowed that negativity to like consume me, and it turned into a full-fledged like depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and it was just a really, really bad time in the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019. Well, in June of 2019, I actually decided that I was never going to have an experience like that. But what I realized is that, and I also, side note, I also studied the field of psychology. And so when I was in school while all of this was happening. And what's crazy is I was learning how to diagnose these things and how to treat them. But I tried to inflict them on myself, but they weren't successful with myself. And so I know that there are a lot of people in the world, especially now it's becoming more acceptable in society with mental health and getting the word out there. But I guess I'm kind of struggling on how to talk about that, because I know some people, well, me myself, I'm a little sensitive to talk about it in general. This is actually the first time that I've said it outside of 3 people that are really close to me. So this is a huge step for me. But how would I kind of bring that into conversation, or like share that part of my story?
Well, let's go back to something, a word I heard, a particular word I heard. When you were going through the classes and you were learning how the diagnoses of particular conditions were being revealed, you said a word when you were trying to use, what were you trying to use the solutions for for yourself? Were you trying to figure out how to diagnose yourself or how to deal with the diagnosis that you were revealing to yourself? Is that what?
So I went through like different classes and I knew how to like diagnose it, but I was trying to, because we also went through like treatment classes and learning how to treat these symptoms and things like that. And so I tried to influence that on my own life, because I'm a
You
big,
said a
like,
particular word. The word that you said there gives me great insight. What's the word you used when you try to use the treatments for yourself? You use a particular word.
tried?
No, inflict.
Okay.
Tell me when you hear the definition. If I was somebody and you were hearing about me on the news and all you heard was he was trying to inflict on people around him, what would you hear?
It kind of sounds like a force.
But it also kind of sounds positive or negative.
Negative.
So somewhere, based upon, again, every word has a vibration. You were trying to inflict the solution on you.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question becomes, if you're trying to inflict it, would anything you want to inflict on yourself, do you think you'd want it to work?
No.
And regardless of, so would you ever, what's your favorite genre of food? Like Italian,
Mexican
Caribbean?
Food. I love Mexican food.
Mexican food. So would you ever go inflict Mexican food on yourself?
Wait, say that one more time. You kind of cut out.
Would you ever go, listen, let's go inflict some Mexican food on us?
Well, I would definitely do that.
But inflict?
Okay. I see what you're saying.
You love Mexican food, but there's this oxymoron. There's this, right, like central intelligence or right or all of these things. So this word that word just kind of it based upon where my brain was nexting, based upon, and then all of a sudden I'm going through diagnosis. I'm learning how to diagnose stuff. I'm learning how to implement treatment. And when I tried to inflict these on me, my brain went, "What? Avocado? What the hell was that?"
Okay.
It didn't make sense anywhere in your passion of your voice. I'm like, that's Dr. Freud to the lobby, Dr. Freud to the lobby. So
yeah, that definitely makes sense.
So part of this might be is that when you go to tell your story, guess what you think you're doing with your story when other people hear it?
Forcing it on other people negatively.
Well, regardless of what it is, you're inflicting it on them.
Inflicting,
so therefore, there's
right.
a perception when you come out, go, well, nobody's going to even want to hear this. And the three people you've told you, and they're telling you, don't tell anybody this. It just reinforces your infliction.
So what would be a word that could be used to replace it?
If you were able to diagnose, so nieces, nephews?
No.
Anyone that you love that's younger than you in their teens or babies?
I have a younger brother. He's 16.
Okay. So if you were going to, if he all of a sudden was in bad shape and you were the smart one in the family that was going to go diagnose it, and you came up with the answer, you figured out all of the symptoms, and you were able to deliver a treatment. How would you want to deliver that treatment?
I would actually want to point out the positives of like what he could do to change it, because I know, like, for example, like right now he's going through like football and trying to decide whether he kind of wants to put more effort into that. And so I would use more motivating terms to like help guide him in a way, instead of focusing on the negative aspect of it.
Okay.
Because at least that's what I've noticed.
How would you describe the treatment? What would you say? How would you describe what you're about to do? Somebody says, "Okay, doc, tell us what you're going to do now," and you're going to say, "Well, we have a solution, and here's what we'd like to do." Well, how would you describe that to somebody who's scared and not sure what you're about to describe? How would you describe the unknown to somebody? Because right now your story is unknown, isn't it? except for three people and the part that you've revealed to us. So when you have to describe the unknown that you know, right? So I would encourage you work on telling a sunrise story. What's the sunrise look like to the blind? This part of your story that people don't understand or you haven't yet revealed. Couple of things to be aware of. After they hear it and their jaw drops or they break out in tears or they get defensive, in an hour they're not going to care. They're really not. They say they will, but I promise you, if I ask the three people that if you gave me their numbers right now, and I were to say to you, hey, listen, how has Brianna's story affected you today? What story?
Right.
Now, if I say, well, that story, that, I think about that all the time. Really? So all I'm saying is that it's important to you, and you don't have to, it's not running through the town naked. It feels like that. It's running through the town saying, I'm not as strong as you think I am. The strength that I currently sit here in front of you with is because it's sometimes my brokenness allowed me my breakthrough.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And that's one thing that I've been kind of telling, at least like people that are close to me, is that your weakness is always your strength. And it's really just based off of your perspective, because if you know that, if you have the mindset or the perspective that I'm going through this so that I'm become a better person or I become stronger at the end of it, that's kind of like where at least my mindset shifted. And so I guess going back to your question, that would kind of be a way that I would bring it across, is letting people know that your weakness, yes, it's a challenge that you're going through, but it's always your strength. And we can use that to bring about like prosperity and happiness in the end, as long as you just change that mindset. Does that make sense?
How much of your dialogue, excuse me, how much of your dialogue that if you had to have with your brother for a treatment, for a possible treatment for him to take on, how much of it would he absolutely just follow you along and do what you say because A, you're his older sister, but B, because he loves you and he knows you love him?
Most likely he wouldn't doubt what I say usually. And it's kind of a joke that my mom has, that she says that he takes what I say as Bible and kind of just does it. So I would say that I have a lot of respect from him.
So I'd ask him, what has allowed you to be able to carry that mantle, to be able to carry that torch in his life? What have you done that he has this absolute trust in you? And that, because does he know your story? Does he know that? Is he one of the three people that know the story?
He is not.
So here's my point. We don't always have to tell the story, but sometimes the story is told through this thing called love.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I definitely see what you're saying now.
So when and if we're afraid to show the love, if people just know, I don't know what it is. How many times have people said this about all of us? I don't know what it is about them. I just love them. I don't know what it is. I don't know what, there's something that about them I absolutely fall in love with. I can say this about every one of you on this call. Every one of you that I've had a second of engagement with, I fall in love with you. Because I know what can happen on the other side. So part of this conversation, part of this dialogue that you have when you're in front of the room, here's the hard part. It's not you falling in love with them. It's letting them fall in love with you.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. Hey, Laura. Good morning, Laura. Laura's raising her hand.
Good morning. How are you, Sean?
Outstanding.
Great. I haven't been on the calls this week, but I listened to the recordings. So I've
Okay,
been up to date.
hold on just a second. Just so that nobody thinks they get in trouble for not being on the calls.
No, I'm just sharing with you.
Good. Okay, good. Okay, just want to make sure nobody feels like, oh my gosh, if I want to talk, I got it. No, I love you.
No, yeah. I just kind of feel like bad when I'm not on the call, but not because of you, but because of me, because I know what they do in me, if that makes sense. So anyway, wow. Well, this topic is a little, it's a lot. It's
huge.
Yeah. But I was just listening to, I guess, the conversations, and I realized that for me in my story, it's more about, so when I've never been, I guess, like when I was going through my story, and like you were saying, like you're still kind of in a way are going through it, right? But like back in the day when I was like starting to go through it and everything, I tried like opening up and like sharing it with people and stuff, and they would always, I guess, minimize it or say like, oh yeah, like it'll be fine, like everyone goes through that. So I got used to people reacting that way, and now when I try to share it as well, especially with like older people, older than me, I get the same reaction. So then I was listening to Brittany, and I'm like, is it because, this is like my mind right now, is it because I'm being superficial about it and I'm just saying like, oh yeah, drugs and alcohol and that, like that's it, and so all they hear is, oh yeah, your teenage years, everyone does drugs, whatever. But there's like a lot more underneath, just messing with alcohol and drugs, because that's what you do in high school, right? So my question, I guess, would be or I'm just kind of like in this space where I don't know if I should tell it in a different way or go more in depth and like give more details, and that would allow them to connect with me. Or is it the fact that people are not going to care, kind of what you were saying, like even if you say all the details, they're still gonna be like, okay,
here's a perception I have. Remember, I can only share with you from my experience. I'm not trained. I'm not a psychologist. I've just got lots of years of experience. So here's what my experience tells me. The reason people push back on hearing stories is because they're afraid there's no success to it. Everybody wants to watch a movie where there's a winner, where there's a champion, where there's the heroine, where there's the hero that comes out. So part of this is being able to tell your story as the heroine of your story. Before I was this, there's always, to a story, there's three parts. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. When people hear your story, it could be that maybe they were on drugs, maybe their kids are on drugs, something, maybe their brothers, nieces, nephews are on drugs, and they don't see the end of the story. So as you begin to tell your story, if you go more into it, whatever the story is, there's got to be a beginning, middle, and an end. You got to take the suspense away from me. You got to take me out of that. Well, what happened next? But I also need to know what happened. And there can be layers to it, right? There's layers to your story. If somebody says, listen, Sean, I want you to get up and I want you to give a 30-second testimonial, I have a 30-second story that has a beginning, middle, and an end. It's not my 5-minute story that I chop up. There's a 30-second story. There's a 1-minute story. There's a 1:30 story. There's a 2-minute story. There's a 3-minute story. So understanding how to put your story into pieces, they're called vignettes. But the reason that some people are afraid is because here's the reality. It took them 50 years to live their life. It took them 50 years to live your life. and you've had their same life experiences in 3 years. And they don't understand how you could have as much pain in your life, as much drama and challenge in your life in your very short time on this planet than they have in their whole life. And because of that, it's very hard for any of us. You all have continued to open my eyes for the last 6, 7 months, 8 months, of just absolutely how challenging your life is. Throw in a Latin stigma, being a female in the Latin community in some cultures. There's some bad things that happen to you all that's just like, yeah, but that happens to everybody. And it's like, are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me? That's typical? Yeah, pretty typical. And you know what I found out? It's way too freaking typical. So much so it's not even a topic. I mean, it's not even a topic at a dinner conversation. It doesn't even make it on the news. And you guys have to deal with that on a daily basis. And it's and now when you get on a social media platform and you're supposed to tell your story, and the challenge is when you tell your story, there's this it's missing. If we were to do color by paints, it's missing all of the number 3 paints. I don't know why it seems hollow. So I'd love to work with you on your story, because it's important that it gets told. But maybe it doesn't have to be told. You just have to know that you can hear it. That's a huge difference. I need you all to hear that. There's a big difference between you telling your story and you being able to hear it. When Heather would start to tell more of her story, when Rhonda would start to tell more of their stories to me, and they'd be like shaking and scared. And now Heather tells the story, and it's not that it's flippant. It's not that it's off the cuff. It's not that it's something she read in a book. This is her real life story. When Monique tells her story about being, and you hear that thing in her throat, that when the words come out, they start to become very staccato because she's on the verge, and it's 7 years later. Listen carefully, it's becoming strong enough to be able to hear her story. And too many people have put it on a shelf for you. It doesn't deserve to be on the shelf. It may not have to be front page news, but that means you're taking a part of your life and putting it on the shelf. Probably causing some internal challenges and dialogue at a subconscious level. Here's what I know. The world needs you. The word test is in testimony for a reason. There's something that you bring to this world that nobody else on this planet can. The 7 billion people on the planet can't bring to this conversation other than you. And there's thousands of people waiting for you to step into your joy and step into your glory, step into your story, so that they can go. Somebody put it on here. Everybody wants to find their twin. You all are. Here's the challenge, and I say this as a challenge in the most positive way. You all are asking to be leaders. You all are being asked to be leaders in what I would consider way too early. But your life is so leadership qualified. I'm sorry, sucks to be you, but you got to take the mantle up. We can't wait on you till you're 30 and 40 and 50 to tell your story going, well, back in my teens, back in my this, and they're like, oh my God, well, where were you? I needed you for my kids. I needed you for my cousins. I needed you for this. And you're like, well, maybe I should have told them, but I'm telling it now. I'm sorry that you've all have had to grow up way too soon. Yeah, that sucks. That's life. Get over it. It is where it is. But what I am saying is that it's important for you when you do step out. 2 things. One, you got a net. That's what this community is. There's other women on here, right, who are strong, who have gone through this, who would be happy to help you through the story because they know what it meant for them. This isn't your typical mastermind. This isn't your typical training call. This isn't a training call. This is a life call. We just happen to be in a good business called life that we get to build people in their life. And we figured out a way to be able to do it in such a way that somebody will pay us when we help people live their life better. Isn't that really what we do here in our profession? So, does that help, Laura?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna reach out to you because I do definitely need a lot of help. And as I was listening to Brittany, she said something that was like, dang, I feel the same way. She was like, I don't even know how I feel about it. And that's kind of how I feel sometimes when I try to tell my story, because it's like, I don't even know how I feel. So I try to think about, okay, how can I make them feel? So I start telling my story from like a perspective that it's not even mine, but I'm just trying to assume what they want to hear. And that's not the point. The point is, you said something. You said it's about you standing in your story. So I'm like, I don't think I've done that. I think I've just assumed what other people want to hear. And that's because, again, it goes back to people always, I guess, telling me how I should feel. So I just kind of took that into how I need to live my life. And right now I'm at a point where I'm like breaking through from that. And I'm like, no. Like, I need to know how I can tell my story, and I need to feel like I can do this.
Now,
So
let me be very clear. Let me throw a little, I'm not throwing a little bomb out there, but I'm throwing out something to be aware of. And this is to every one of you, guys and gals. When you tell your story, there's an energy shift inside of you. You can ask Monique, you can hear it. Monique hears it when Heather tells her story. When you can stand in your story, you may have some people who become quite jealous of you standing in your story. And it's not because they're becoming jealous of you standing in your story, it's that you've had an energy shift that they can't explain. The expression comes up, if you've ever told anybody you're going to tell your story and they say, have you lost your mind? Listen carefully. When they say, have you lost your mind? What they're saying is if you do that, you're going to cause me to lose the mind I have, the memory I have of you, and I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with, when I told my story, the biggest fear I had was not that somebody else found out about my story, was that what my mom was going to say about me, saying that I'm the son of an alcoholic. The biggest fear was of when I was going to tell the story of how it affected me when I went out to the barn and said, I'm going to never have another bad day, because the way my mom reacted and responded to the story of my brother being outed, the fights and the rifts that were caused in our family that eventually healed, but the scars were still there. I was afraid about what my mom was going to say. I was afraid about what my dad might think. I really wasn't even worried about what the rest of the world did. So as you go through this, be aware that when you step into your joy, when you step into your glory, when you step into your energy, I have no doubt Heather and Monica can both, because those are very highly emotional stories that they tell. And every one of yours is as well. They've had 7 years practice. Heather's had 13 years keeping it quiet in the last couple of years, telling about it and becoming more and more. And now all of a sudden it's like she's on radio shows, she's on webinars, she's being interviewed all over the place. And it's like, because everybody wants to hear her story. Everybody wants to leverage her story. And there's people that get jealous of all of a sudden this newfound, quote, fame that you get. So just be aware of that. And again, I'm going to speak to the ladies, because sometimes your strength may not be known how to be taken by the male counterparts in your world. Just say, listen, I'm going on a journey. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I just know that on this journey, there may be some changes that happen in me. I just want you to be aware of it, so that if you see those, just know I'm on a journey. So, does that help, Laura?
It does.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you, as you sit there in this highly contemplative mindset, because I can see it on your face, sit there in the joy of saying, "This is my start." Because the stories of why did you even say that? Oh my God, I should have never said that. What was I thinking? I don't know. That nobody needs to know this. I don't know. I opened up a can of worms. Does that any of that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, human nature is so kind of predictable. And especially now that you've become vulnerable, listen, we all love you. And whether you go any farther with it or not, it isn't even it's not even a factor. It's the fact that you went this far that you need to reward yourself for. Whether you go any farther or not, you went this far today on this moment. So know that you listen. How many of you heard Laura's story, the way she shared it and what she shared? How many of you said, "Yep, that's me"? How many of you she gave you a little bit of courage to take the next step, the next little foot shuffle in your life because you heard what she said? See, y'all are this amazing community and sharing this story in a safe place. So thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Sean.
I love you.
I love it.
So, Shami, good morning, Shami.
Good morning.
Good morning. You sound a little muffled. There you go.
Um, can you hear me better?
Yes, hear you perfectly.
Okay. So, um, everything, everything you just said, Sean. My God. Um, I have a question, but I want to say it's kind of crazy how I feel like I could almost relate to every single person that has just talked. Even with the weight loss, I've never been overweight. I was actually I'm tiny, but I was always been from a very young age praised for my body, especially from um opposite sex. But I was unhealthy. I had a lot of conjunction, like mucus, like always sick, always sick, always sick. And I had a friend that completely changed my life. I went vegetarian and vegan for a while, about 2 years. And then after Hurricane Maria, which I know it was a horrible excuse, but after the Hurricane Maria, just kind of little by little starting going back to my old eating habits, but still never been as unhealthy as I was at one point because I do yoga, I exercise, not like as consistency as I would like, but I do it a lot, a few times, 2 or 3 times a week. And I eat a lot better than I used to. So, but I feel like I just can relate to everybody's story, and that's amazing to me. And a few things that you just said, Sean, like really hit the point. But my question is like, what if you feel like you're gonna offend somebody, like some, especially like one of the most important persons to you, which like your mom? What if I feel like I'm just gonna offend her in many ways? Should it like do I have to talk to her first?
So part of this is your intent. So is your intent when you look at the baby, when you go to
Okay.
tell the story, are you telling it with the intent to offend your mother?
No, no, not at all. And she's
No, of course.
very different person nowadays. She's a very different person, and it's crazy because everybody. I feel like such an emotional person, but everybody in my family, like I'm the kind of like the glue. Everybody just sees me differently. Like feel like they sometimes they may see me more than I feel like I am, even to them. Like I don't know.
Hey, Heather, can you chat? Can you give some input to Shannon? You may not be able to chat.
Yes, I can. I'm gonna walk away so I can.
Okay. So
That was one of.
Hold on just a second. Shami, have you ever had a conversation with Heather?
I heard I've been on the calls when she speaks, but not like directly to her.
Okay, so let me just do something real quick. So, Shami, I want to introduce you to Heather. Heather's an amazing
Hi,
soul,
Heather.
Hi.
and Heather has inspired me to do things I never thought possible. The story she's told and the things that you've heard about her, they're all surfaces. They're all just little peaks of these amazing valleys and darkness that she's been through. And when I ask her to share with you, it's because she can share as a mom, she can share as a daughter, she can share as all of these things that you're telling that I could never, ever, 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 never be even begin to comprehend. So, and Heather, I get to introduce you to Shami, who's this amazing soul, who's got this incredible smile, who's been this, who's built this armor around her to protect her in this little peanut of a body that exists, kind of like yours. And in this peanut of a body, there's this absolutely ferocious, ever loving monster that wants to just bring joy to the world. So I'm glad I get to introduce the two of you here. And Heather, I want you to share what's on your heart when you hear Shami having a conversation.
So, the first couple things you said, they really touched me because I really struggled with that part of um, caring or worrying how my truth would affect my mom. Um, Sometimes it took me a long time to even be able to have a decent relationship with my mom because I held so much hatred and so much resentment towards her and my father for the things that had happened to me as a child. And it wasn't until prison happened that I was able to kind of step out of all of my anger and try to, I don't know, kind of imagine what it was like for her as a mother. Okay. Those horrible things were happening to me, but what about the life that she was living also, right?
I
And
went through that actually, Heather. I went through that, but I don't know how in depth. But I stopped talking to my mom for a few years, for about 3 or 4 years. I'm 27 now, so from like the time I was like 21, 22 to 26.
mm-hmm.
But she always would come around, and I wasn't mean either. I just kept my distance a lot. And now that we have a relationship again, and it's actually, I see the change in her. We just never got into conversations, and I know that I don't think it would end well if we did. So since we're kind of like just both in a different place, as personality wise, I haven't had, I don't like want to, I don't want that to get messed up now. So like when you guys speak about the story, and then nobody had actually mentioned it into Sean, that he mentioned his mom, that he didn't want to, basically he had to deal with that, hurting her feelings. But I don't want to mess up like our relationship now by me telling a whole bunch of people how my childhood was with her.
Well, you I don't know that I ever really had a one-on-one conversation with my mom about, how it made me feel, right? I just made sure to let her know that who she is now matters, right? What she is in my life and how she has changed and the things that she's doing, it matters so much. And I just got to a point where
Hi.
um
Hi.
Hi.
Her feelings matter, but her feelings don't matter more than mine. And I don't talk to my dad. I don't talk to my dad at all. So there's the difference there. You see, like she
My dad is my rock. Thank God. I thank God for him all the time.
Well,
And
you're
he's
lucky.
not perfect.
Nobody
He's not
is.
perfect, but he showed me so much love. Like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No, you're fine.
just you saying that is it kind of, and I know I don't want to say, I know it sounds a little selfish, but just you saying that reminds me of how lucky I am to have him, you know.
And that's important, right? Because you don't have the same relationship with everyone, right? And you have to know she is who she is, and whatever happened, okay? And she may not like the truth. My mom don't like the truth. Sometimes I'll say something and it's not even meant to be super negative. It's not even meant to be negative at all, but she'll take it negatively, okay? And guess what? That's her. That's not my burden to bear. And at some point you get there, okay? It might take. My mom still doesn't understand why people want to talk to me. She asks, why do people want to talk to you? Why do they want to fly you to London? She doesn't understand. And guess what? Some people just never will. And that's okay too.
That helped me was that hearing, I went to Puerto Rico. I was in Puerto Rico a few years while she was over here, and I was around her family a lot more, and then hearing so many stories of how she was raised, how my were raised, especially my grandma. I couldn't even believe what they went through. So hearing that was kind of what made me little by little start reaching to her again. And I wanted to ask you, did you ask permission? Did you talk to her? Did you tell her you were going to say things that were kind of personal that happened? Or
I didn't ask nobody's permission because I didn't ask her permission, but when I did my interview with Jessica Higdon and it got really deep and I saw how many people actually saw that, before I let her see it, I told her that I loved her no matter what she feels, that I don't know that I said I forgive you, because I don't know that I actually forgive for the things that were allowed to happen to me, but I kind of understand, okay? Like I can kind of see how those things could happen, and knowing the things, you know, everybody has their weaknesses, right? Everybody's not as strong, and the things that she had to live with and the things that she had to go through are the reasons why my childhood was the way that it was, right? So no, I did not ask anybody's permission, but yes, I did tell her that it doesn't matter what you hear, like I'm going to let you watch this, and no matter what you feel in this moment, know that I love you, and that stuff happened, and this is my truth, and this is my reality. Mommy, and Mama, she doesn't have to like it, but it doesn't change what we have right now. Mommy, I want the bus. Go find it. No bus. Go find it. No. Okay. You call it. I'm sorry.
No. Question for Sean.
Call it and then open it.
Or maybe answer it together. What, like Sean has said before, that our memories, or how we think things happen, are like half true, like literally like the percentage of it actually being a reality. I mean, I know what I remember and what happened, but I just think about that, and then I think about like what is
how.
And I mean, it's even happened before where we have arguments because she just says I'm lying. So that just came to mind, like that's my story, but my story, but I feel like maybe.
Listen, don't try to allow someone to tell you what you know is real isn't real, okay? Sometimes they don't like your truth, and that's why I don't have a relationship with my father. And it was hard, and I tried to reconcile. I tried to make things good, but you know what? Like at the end of the day, I had to stop trying to make him be what I wanted him to be to me, right? Toxic is toxic, and what is not good for you is just not good for you. And sometimes you have to learn to love people like AT&T, long distance. And that's how I deal with my dad. Like I don't call him, I don't associate with him. I want nothing to do with that, because no matter how hard I try, he will never be who I need him to be. And that's just how it is. And he chose the family he was brought into and born into over the daughter that he brought into this life. And he loved those people more than he loves me, and he loves my children. And that hurts. That hurts to say that, but it is so true. And at some point, she's your mom and you can love her, right? But if she can't love you how you need to be loved, then distancing yourself is not a bad thing. But you can't let her toxicity affect where you're going. Like, you have to heal. And sometimes you can't heal with that.
Yeah. It's
Shami,
crazy. I look at my daughters and I just think like I can't imagine. It just I know I'm not gonna be a perfect mom, but
Nobody's perfect, baby. We all make mistakes.
I'm gonna protect. I don't want them to go through a lot of things that just they shouldn't go through.
That is your biggest job, to protect your kids from the things that they don't have to go through.
Why I write it down. Just want to be a better mom. That's what I want to be.
And you can be, and you already are. The fact that you know that they're more important than all of that other stuff, that is the biggest step. I never thought I could be anything more than a mom, because I just wanted to love my babies. I wanted to be the best mom that I could ever be, because I lacked love so much from my mom and from my dad. Like, that was hard. But I just knew in my heart that when I had the chance, when I had the opportunity, that I was never, ever, ever going to do that to my kids. I would never allow them to be in situations where they could be abused the way that I was abused. And then, and then, and then when I was ripped from him and I had to leave him with the people who left those things happen to me, and I had no choice. I did not know what was going on with him. That was the ultimate torture. But nothing happened to him. She knew better this time. She knew that she was going to deal with me if she ever let anything happen to him.
Mm-hmm.
You're a great mom.
I do trust her with my daughter. I feel like she's changed a lot, and I'm happy that I've influenced her to change a lot. She's actually told me that before. So I know, that things are getting better. I know that. And Heather, when I first heard your story, I when I heard you speak that first time, I cried so much, and I didn't even know how much I could actually relate to you, besides just imagining how hard it would be for you to be without him there, But now speaking to you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for talking.
amazing.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing your soul.
Thank you.
That's right. Another interview.
Listen, think about this. Think about this. That question that child just asked. Another interview. How would it be to show up with that child? My mom was always on interviews. The world wanted to know about her. How cool is that? You think that changes the trajectory of their future, what they see as possible? My mom's always on the call. Oh, I grew up, my mom was constantly on the conversation, whether it be Oprah or Steve Harvey or CNN News. Or wouldn't that be cool?
It's definitely showing my kids that they can do different things. And honestly, when I keep thinking about how this all really started, it was my son. He had a report to do for school, and he was like, "Mom, can you please can I record you?" It was just voice, it wasn't video, and he asked me to tell some of my story. And I at that point I never really had, and I did it for him, and it was his senior year, and he got an A on his report, and his teacher was his wrestling coach, and his teacher was floored, and it was just I don't know, the experience of, these educators, that they were interested in how touched they were with this story that I was so afraid of. It touched me. But the fact that my kid was, this is my stepson, but he's my kid, that he was not ashamed of me the way that I had been ashamed of myself, or the way that I had looked at myself, that was the first moment that I realized that I was making an impact, and it wasn't the impact that I thought. It wasn't. They weren't looking at me like I thought they would. And now these little ones, like they know I'm going on these trips, and they know that I'm speaking to people, and it's so different. And they know all about Colombia. They know that mommy was in prison, and they know. I'm sorry. It's okay. She's having a meltdown. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's definitely a different experience. So
here's the great news. Shami, Heather, you guys are going to connect. You'll find each other on Instagram or wherever. But this is my goal. Make the world better. And I promise you, I need you strong women. Ralph said it. You women are so strong. And yeah, you absolutely are. I mean, Rhonda said it a couple of times, right? Real Talk Kim has said it a couple of times. As far as I know, you're the only ones that like push a baby out today and be in the grocery store on, Tuesday. So y'all are just amazing. Um, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Shami. Brittany, you've got. I see your hand up.
Yeah. Um, so it's quite interesting because the older I get, I'm 29 now, and Bree said something earlier about her story being taboo, and I feel like she kind of mentioned it before, but I'm not 100% sure. But the older I get, the more I realize that people are affected by maternal issues. We're so used to speaking about issues with our fathers that it's kind of like the first kind of example that I could think of that's like really public was like Eminem. And in his rap music or in his songs, he would just talk about how much he hated his mom. And people were like, what? It's as if like society in the world puts mothers on this pedestal as if they're incapable of being toxic, if that as if they are so removed from being human that they are so much without error. And it's funny because like my story has to do with my mom and my grandmother. I have like a very strong dislike for my mother, right? And it came a point of time where I didn't necessarily like talk to people about it, but what happened was that my mom would tell everyone that she knew about it, and it painted this picture of me in their head. And I never talked bad about her to anyone like with unwarranted, and I never actually like defended myself because I always felt that if my character is my character and it would show and prove, and if something is not the truth, like I don't have to defend it because the truth is the truth, it doesn't need any proof. But it's crazy because like people would come to me and be like, oh my God, Britt, like, did you really do this or did you really do that? And it's like, okay, so like now she's telling half the story, but I would just be like, okay, whatever, like that's not how it happened, whatever. I never felt the need to correct it. But it's so crazy because I was actually just involved in like basically like a relationship where we got into multiple physical altercations, and still I wouldn't speak on it, but I found out that he was like, I call it playing victim, but I mean whatever, but it was like he was going and like telling people the story, and like I confronted him about it and I was like, why are you doing that? You know what I'm saying? And he would say like, oh, I'm living my truth, right? And I was just like, at first I was just like, what? But because I didn't understand like why would you go and like unsolicitedly tell people something only from your perspective to like purposely paint a picture of someone else that's and you're putting people like in your business, and they look at you a certain type of way, and like that's really just unfair. So it's like in my stories I'm always the person who's just like, let it go. You know what I'm saying? But like, is there a need to like, I don't feel that there's a need to defend what other people say, or like, I don't like if someone came to me and asked me questions, because I know a lot of people were saying like, oh, I don't want to like offend my mom when I tell this story. Now, the examples that I gave were offensive because you have to think about the intention behind it. People, they were telling that story to kind of like justify what they did, or to kind of like prep people just in case like something big happened, and to like paint a picture of like me or whoever else, if you've experienced that, so that if you like pop off, for lack of better words, like they're like, okay, I knew that she would do that. But like if you're telling the story from not a malicious place, the person who is like the antagonizer in the story, they can't, the truth offends people. And like a lot of people who are like aggressive and they're wrong, they live in a state of delusion and denial. My mom. And it's like, I'm like, hey, like you can't, like if she feels some type of way, I always tell her like, hey, we know what happened. You know what I'm saying? The truth, like I said, is the truth. Like you can't stray away from that. Obviously, we have our own personal feelings, but if you just stick to the actual facts of what happened and paint everybody truthfully, yourself, your actions that were involved, them and their actions that are involved, it kind of like lessens the blow, because it's like, hey, I know that you did this, but I also did this maybe to provoke or to prevent or to protect, but I acted this way. And it also wasn't like a good way to act. So therefore, like when you just speak with good intentions and like you want the story to be heard, and you're looking for solution, you're looking for healing, you're looking for restitution, you're looking for growth, progression, like whatever it is that you're thinking about the outcome, as long as it's like a good outcome, that person has no room to like contort, you know what I'm saying, like your narrative. Because it's like Dang, I just lost it. Okay, that's it. Because I don't have the last part, but it's like
Okay.
yeah, they have no room to contort it.
Right. Here's the funny thing about truth. Truth is always as the letter A. Thank God people learn how to use it in many words, but the letter A is always truth. But how it's used to tell the truth sometimes is a different story. So I get you. It's there's a lot to what you just shared with us. There's a lot to that. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you shared it. You're an amazing soul.
I hope that helps someone, like as far as like getting telling their story out, because like I've literally been through that my entire life, like even up until now. And it's just like I have to take a step back and was like, hey, wait a minute, like why is it when I'm in these positions with different people, it always kind of ends up like this. So I kind of like start to inflect and see like what ways I could switch the narrative so that if that it never turns out to be like this ever again, versus just focusing on the other people, because like the way people react to you and respond to you and they treat you sometimes also has to do with you yourself. So once you start like putting up that like, hey, this is me, this is how you treat me, this is how you react to me, that those boundaries in like persona, I guess, then everything else around you would kind of like switch. And if they can't uphold those boundaries, you just have to let them go. And I know like we get really trapped into like trying to hold on to family, but honestly, like those are the people who have the potential to hurt you the most, because you are the least, you're so vulnerable and transparent with those people. So they affect you a lot. But I just hope that everybody like kind of like gets through that, like through those emotions and feel those things and like question themselves and question others and just like really dig deep to like find out what it is that's causing this thing, so that this could be the year or the time or the day or the month that it like never has to happen ever again, because you switch that narrative within yourself, that you don't allow it anymore. Okay, that's it. Bye.
Love you, Brittany. Thank you. And it's a powerful conversation. Um, and say your first name for me. Thanks, please.
Dakaya.
Dakaya. I want to. Good morning, Dakaya.
Good morning. I'm actually glad that Brittany went first because I thought it was interesting how so let me start off with I study like I'm interested in like studying cinematography and photography. So I'm always into the art of storytelling. And I feel like I've always told my story through I shared it in the comments down low, and it was Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And basically it's just that you're the hero in your journey, and you just input the people like as the characters that are in the story. You'll see what I mean, like if you look it up, right? So I thought it was funny because I always look at like family dynamics. So I have a household where I have a lot of strong females, and the only male that I really have to look up to is my dad. So my dad has been in jail for most of his life and most of mine. So but I still have a relationship with him. I grew up in a household with my sister. She's 7 years older than me, and she doesn't talk to him at all. So hearing Brittany say that, like, I have a really strong relationship with my mom and my grandma, but not my sister, and I still have a really strong relationship with my dad. Um, so another thing too, Brittany, you shared that your mom, she does, what what's happened in my family a lot, where people, they share the like, I guess they focus on the negative aspect of the story. So this one time when I was a kid, I was like 4 years old, and I had this best friend. I can't remember her real name, but I remember her nickname was Kitty, and she was this Hawaiian girl. She had very long hair, and so one night she was like, I really don't like my hair. Can you help me cut it? Right. So I cut it, and my mom ended up telling it to to like a lot of people in my family, and like they joked about it for the longest time, but I never spoke up that like she asked me to do it and how happy she was that I did it, even though like our parents were mad at us that we actually did it. Like I feel like a lot of times they listen to what we like they give us what we want sometimes, but not what they need. Like, for instance, my mom went to work and went to school full time. So there was a point in time where, you know, my sister could be self sufficient. She's 7 years older than me, and I'm like a baby. So I went to live with my grandma. And then, you know, that meant that I got pulled from my school situation there. And then my grandma got cancer, so, and my dad was coming home from jail, and it was on my birthday. So then when I went home, yeah. And then when I went home, I started school at the end of second grade. So I had like 2 months to make, well, actually, I don't even think I had that. I think I had like less than a month to make friends for summer. And I'm in this new place. And I actually did make a friend, which is one of my longtime friends that I have today. Her name is Olivia. And I just thought it was funny because she went through the same thing that my original friend Kitty went through, in that like she tried to express herself. She's not like, you know, traditional in a sense. You know, she's bisexual. You know, she has red hair. Like she just like she's always been. She's left-handed like me. So I saw how like I could like openly express myself, but she's only getting to do it now. And I guess just seeing that, like she has a strong male influence in her household versus me having strong like women in my household, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to share.
Well, thank you, Bekai. I appreciate that. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the stories that we go through, like Laura
Yeah.
said there, it is to make us stronger.
Right.
When Heather talks about her story, and then she wound up in prison, and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things, maybe the previous story happened because of what was potential in her life that showed up to make her strong and ready for that.
Right.
One of the things that I'd share with people is, you know, with Shami, I go back to Shami and say, hey, listen, have you ever thanked your mom for all of the for the strong woman that you've become?
I have.
And
And I
so,
do it to my grandma all the time,
yeah,
and I'm finally doing it with my sister. Actually, I sorry to interrupt you, but I'm doing this 21 days of abundance, and
yeah,
it was to write a letter to the person who had kind of hurt you the most. So I don't know, I guess because I'm so connected to my parents and my grandma, that I see that my sister doesn't necessarily have that, because you know she isolates herself a lot. So like it comes to the point where I didn't speak up for so long that she kind of inputted their opinions onto me, even though I never had to like say it, even though like I always supported her, because I was close to them and she wasn't. I was automatically like thrown in with them. So now that I like wrote that letter to her, I'm just waiting for her to read it and see what she says back to me. So that's another thing.
yep, that's important. Well, there you go, folks. An amazing conversation. Um, y'all are just awesome. I appreciate y'all so much taking your time today to be vulnerable, to share, to give some insight, to give some foresight, some backsight, some upsight and downside, and all of that insight. Y'all say you love each other. I appreciate y'all. Tomorrow morning we're back to 6:30 a.m. I appreciate y'all. I'm Sean Murphy, founder of Mental Profits. I'll see y'all where at the next event. Love
Mhm.
y'all.
Thank you, Sean. I love you guys.
Love y'all. Take care.
Love
Love
all
you
of
Bye,
y'all,
all.
man.
everybody.
Miss you.
Have
Love
a happy
you.
full moon day.
All y'all
Love
are
you all. Have a
powerful
great
women. I
day.
love y'all.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, y'all
Thank you.
women
We
are
love you
super
too.
powerful.
Yes, they did. They took over
There's
this session
power in you
today.
Yes, they
men
did.
too.
And we were
I loved
listening.
it
We were
all.
listening.
Uh-huh. All y'all are powerful and
We're
special.
all powerful.
Yeah, we all are, and so are
Yes,
you.
y'all are.
Man,
Y'all
woman,
run the world.
Right.
Take care.
Love y'all. Bye for now.
Love y'all.
I love you,
Love you
Sean.
too. Bye bye.
You.